like to say I'm not Mr. Wang. I'm not Iris. Iris could not attend. Unfortunately, I am Philip Zhang. And honestly, it's an honor to be presenting here. I'm still in high school, and this is the first time I'm presenting. It's the first time I'm presenting in this professional of a setting. So yeah, I'm excited to present assessing the role of forests in climate sustainability with machine learning. So I'll try to keep the background brief since most of this is accepted knowledge, but Earth's climate system has been affected by multiple factors, and CO2 is by far the most impactful warming factor. Human activities have significantly increased the atmospheric concentrations of CO2 since the pre-industrial era, and this has led to a global temperature rise of around 1 degree Celsius. This has caused the increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, and this causes widespread damage and loss of life. Now, there are many methods to dealing with CO2 emissions, and a lot of them have been touched upon previously in this conference. Topics like carbon capture, clean fuel, renewable energy, etc. And our research focuses on forests and the role they can play as a natural carbon sink. Previous work has demonstrated that US forests play a significant role in sequestrating atmospheric CO2. Trees can take in around 20 to 25% of our anthropogenic CO2 emissions. And that sequestrated CO2 is then turned into biomass. And that biomass has a very long turnover time in the hundreds of years. This means that the carbon stays in biomass form in the environment and is released back into the cycle very slowly. And thus, trees provide a natural and potent solution to fighting against climate warming. A question of interest is then, how will these forests respond to changing climate conditions? And there has been work done in this area previously. Most projections of forest growth have been dominated by process-based land models. And these are models that simulate in precise detail the dynamics of vegetation. And although they are detailed, they are computationally expensive. And so that makes them more useful for smaller scale studies. Our goal is to develop machine learning models that can accurately predict US forest biomass and then project how they will change under different climate scenarios. So for our data, we sourced our data from the
Is that the one with the red light? Did it run out of battery?
Lights off.
Lights off. You ran out of battery.
Patterns are like with batteries.
Testing. Okay. So yeah, we source our data from ERA5. This is a database from the European Weather Organization that has many different variables. The ones we are interested in are temperature, rain, pressure, wind, radiation, and LAI, or leaf area index. LAI is basically a measure of how dense the canopy is in forests.
I don't see anything yet. Say something.
Hello?
Say it again.
Hello?
I'm still not seeing it with button here.
Don't worry, we've been having technical glitches all the conference. It's not your fault.
No, nobody's fault. If we can manage to fix it, we're trying to get the audio back out to the Zoom.
There should be any audio issues with the power.
By the way, Team Tree.
I agree, Team Tree.
While she's playing with that, I wanted to ask one quick question, which is the numbers the things you're talking about with the biomass of trees and carbon sequestration, are you looking at just the trees, or are you looking at the trees plus the soil organic matter? Are you considering soil organic matter in that at all, or?
Yeah, we are including everything in like the forest ecosystem.
Okay, perfect.
or is everything working?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I think I left off at the independent variables, so temperature, rain pressure, wind radiation, and leaf area index. Our goal is to find a correlation between those and biomass. The biomass data we sourced from Saatchi, a paper from Saatchi and others. And before we process our data, we first regridded into the same dimension, 360 by 720 or half a degree grid cells. We then discard any data that's not from forests and we stratify it. One thing we do in particular is duplicate any values that are underrepresented. So in our case, high biomass data points were being underrepresented in the models. And so duplicating those values actually significantly increased our accuracy. So then we also do normalization to facilitate our models. We scale the values between 0 and 1. We average them across each year in order to save on computational time. And yeah, our historical data spans from between 2000 and 2019. We split this at an 80-20 ratio into a training set and testing set. We train our models based on that, and then we make a future prediction. So the two models we used are a quantile regression forest, which was what Iris worked on, and a neural network, which is what I worked on. So a QRF, or quantile regression forest, it consists of different decision trees, each of which can give a prediction. And then not only can the QRF give the average response of all of them, it can also give predictions in, say, the 5th or 95th quantiles. And so this can give us not only the distribution of the predictions, but also it gives us a way to quantify uncertainty. And then the part I worked on is the neural network. And this is a very well-known type of model. We take in inputs through an input layer of neurons, and then that's passed into hidden layers. And each neuron, each link is optimized to give the most accurate output. So we performed some analysis on our data, and we found that pressure skewed left and rainfall skewed right, which posed a challenge for model training, while the distribution of temperature and wind speed were almost symmetric. And we also found that using LAI, leaf area index, to categorize environmental predictors did show meaningful patterns, such as high temperature and high rainfall being correlated with denser canopy forests. We also found some feature correlations which, broadly speaking, align with environmental principles. For example, there's a positive correlation between radiation and temperature, and a negative correlation between pressure and temperature. So that's a good way to verify that our data is sound. So as for our model performance, the QRF performed slightly better than the neural network, although both models did achieve relatively high R-squared scores, correlation scores of between 0.8 and 0.9 or higher. And this means that our models are accurate and they can predict the US biomass based on the historical data to a very high accuracy compared to observed values. So at this point, we also did attribution analysis. So this is basically shuffling the variables multiple times, and then we associated how much the values correlated with a change in the biomass predictions, and we found that rainfall was the highest, most correlated variable. So now that we have our models, we want to make a prediction into the future. And so in order to do this, we apply the space for time theory. And this theory states that spatial differences between sites can serve as proxies for temporal changes. And this means basically that if you want to study how a forest will change based on one variable, for example, you can study a different forest that's maybe in the same conditions but has that one variable currently changing or already changed. And then based off of that, we can infer what will happen to the forest we are studying. And this provides a feasible way to study long-term processes without having to conduct studies over the long period of time. And then for our warming scenarios, we consider the Paris Agreement. So ideally, under the Paris Agreement, global warming will not exceed ideally not exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. As of 2020, there's been around 1.1 degrees, so we have around half a degree left of leeway, and this is what our projection was based off of. However, it's not the only possibility. For example, if we keep to our current policies, we can expect 2.9 degrees of warming, which means an additional 1.8 degrees of warming. And then if we meet our current pledges, there will be an additional 1.5 degrees of warming. And I think one thing to note is that we would have liked to consider, in addition to temperature, other environmental variables in our projections. However, when we looked at SSP scenarios, and then also ECMs or Earth coupled models, and the data provided by those for different environmental variables, they did not match. They were incompatible with our models, and so that's an area we are definitely looking into more, is to reconcile our models with the given projected data in order to create a more comprehensive prediction. As for what we do have, which is based off of 0.5 degrees of warming, our neural network predicts Washington as having the highest potential to grow biomass, and the QRF model predicts Maine as having the highest potential. In general, forests across the US will grow in size. However, some areas, such as in semi-arid places like California, show a decrease. And so in areas with high biomass growth, we recommend forest conservation efforts in order to protect the forests and ensure that they can serve as a natural climate solution. And we also recommend improved forest management in areas of biomass decrease in order to prevent the forest from dying. And yeah, I guess for some other future considerations, we can use different models. We can, for example, combine our models or use CNNs, convolutional neural networks, traditionally used for images, but they could also be applied here. We can consider other environmental factors, like I previously mentioned. We can consider other scenarios with the same modeling framework. For example, I've been looking into modeling algae in oceans. It's sort of similar to this. And yeah, I think that is it. Thank you for listening.
We are open for any questions.
Thank you so much for the work you've done on this and your partner Iris. I don't really have a question so much as somebody in this room should give this man and his partner a PhD. Okay? Fantastic work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you if you found any particular part of your research surprising or interesting or unexpected?
Honestly, the biggest surprise for me during this project is probably like the data pre-processing. It was much more convoluted than I expected, but I think it's a good experience into any future work that I may do. And I think I have a better idea of the challenges that I might face in the future.
Do we have any other question?
So just a comment, you're looking at forests and the dynamics of forests going forward and thinking about carbon and carbon sequestration. One of the things we're finding really interesting is that although carbon and other greenhouse gases are driving long-term thermal retention by the Earth's biosphere, and what we're also seeing is that water vapor is a huge short-term intermediator of thermal transfer in the environment, which means that weather extremes are driven by water vapor more than they are by carbon. So whereas average global temperature is probably driven more by carbon, some of these extremes have to do with variability in water vapor, and water vapor that's properly managed can actually help to stabilize that. So one of the things that's very interesting is that forests are incredibly important in maintaining through evapotranspiration in the biotic pump the amount of water vapor and the stability of that in climates. So the exact same modeling you're doing right now has some very interesting things that could be looked at in terms of what are the evapotranspirative and biotic pump implications of the same thing. So
Continue looking at the carbon, but I think that's also.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Battery died.
Thank you.
Oh, number 2 battery.